Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
There's one devotee, he's a senior devotee, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada that was like a peer of Aindra Prabhu named Toshan Krishna Prabhu. He's the father of one of my friends. And he said something very, very valuable and very helpful about Aindra that I think is really important. Because Aindra Prabhu was a very colorful person. He was a real sadhu that could speak incredibly strongly. And, you know, just the reality is maybe not everybody appreciated him the way I may appreciate him. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of different angles of vision about him. And some people he managed to really rub the wrong way. I'm very aware of that. And so what Toshan Krishna Prabhu said, because we were sharing memories. He had a few memories, I had a few memories, and we shared them. And he kind of like, you know, some of my memories, he kind of like, yeah, oh yeah, that's the Aindra I remember. And he said, what he said was, to understand Aindra, first you have to love him. And then, you know, all the wild, heavy things he says make complete sense. If you don't love him, he may really rub you the wrong way.
First I met him, I was a fresh devotee, 2 months old bhakta. and somehow I was here in Vrindavan with my spiritual master, later spiritual master, Ramapad Swami. And I came down for Gaurarti one night, and I saw this man with this big wumpers. He was playing this wumpers, and he's jumping up and down. Had this, you know, had the outfit, you know, that Aindra Prabhu had, and he's got all this red hair in his back. And I was like, what the hell? Who is this guy? You know, even for a seasoned devotee was quite a scene, but I was just a young devotee. And I was like cracking up, you know, what is this? And then some other, because I was kind of far from the Kirtan scene, and he somehow felt my glance or my impression, and then he looked back on me and turned back, and he was smiling at me. So we had the first exchange, you know. So it was kind of friendly. It was a good start, you know.
The very first time I walked into the Krishna Balaram temple room and took darshan of the deities, offered my obeisances, it was like mid-afternoon, which would probably mean sometime between 4 and 6. And Aindra Prabhu, it could have, you know, I take that back. It could have been mid-morning. You know, the temple closes right between 1 and 4. So if it was mid-morning, then, you know, it was obviously after the Bhagavatam class and before 1 o'clock. So I walked in to take darshan of the deities for the very first time, and Aindra Prabhu was there with his, you know, his hair was long, his beard was out, and his eyes, the way I remember them, was it's like they were on fire. And I can't remember ever seeing him again in the years afterwards that I knew him with the intensity that I felt like he had that year in that Karti. Like, I just remember, taking darshan of the deities and just looking back and seeing Aindra Prabhu, and, he kind of had, like, his leg up behind the harmonium. I remember that. His eyes, it was like they were on fire.
He was doing Kirtan at night. He would come down 1 o'clock, I think. He had a 1 to 4:30 shift. Madhava was playing Mridanga. It was like heavenly, Kirtan. Sweet Mridanga, really nice. And he was very strong about, how, you're not after name and fame, and, you don't want to be in daylight and get all the, attention and the woman and this and that, and we want to do nighttime Kirtan when there's nobody around. And I was like, wow, this guy, it was just, really intense, That's how Aindra was. He's always intense, Even when he had his sweet moments, emotional moments, he was also always very intense, even then. So, and my spiritual master was asking me, because I was going to these night kirtans every night. It was so beautiful, and it was quite an experience. And he asked me, why am I not coming to Srila Prabhupada's Gurvastakam, prayers to Samadhi Mandir? And I was like, I'm getting busted here, what to do. And I had told him that I'm going to the Samparam, this devotee is chanting there. I don't know his name, it's just so beautiful. Sometimes he asked me to play that string instrument, and I don't even know how to do it. He just told me just do the strokes at the end of the mantra, in the middle of the mantra. And I said, that's Aindra, and he says, no, it's okay, you can go, keep going. You don't have to come for Mangalarti.
And the first thing I thought, it struck me so clearly. I just thought, now I get what Kirtan is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like that. The temple I had come from, very sincere, wonderful devotees, actually. Several are still friends. But, like the Kirtan that I had been, certainly compared to that, it may be that sometimes the Kirtan is just like a formality, a ritual. You somehow just tolerate it for 20 minutes until there's prasadam, like you have to go. You want people to think you're a good or sincere devotee, so you have to go. And who can play the mridanga, who can sing. Anyway, Haribol, we're interested in devotion. But with Aindra, it was on a completely different level. It was just so obvious that this was an incredibly serious person who took this very, very seriously, and who had just, developed his kirtan to a very, very high level of both musical and technical expertise, and just, an incredible mood and feeling that he put behind that kirtan. I mean, it was really like nothing I had ever experienced. It left a huge impression on me. I mean, I feel like seeing him for those first moments, that's when I entered Vrindavan. That's when I got a little bit of an understanding, to whatever degree I'm capable of. Okay, that's what Vrindavan is about. It's about people just completely putting their hearts on the line, begging Krishna for some kind of mercy. That's what I felt the first time I saw him.
I heard from devotees in New York, Prabhupada disciples, he's got brothers. Then when Aindra was singing, devotees were leaving the temple room. Because he's an eccentric person. And, he had his style, he had his look, external look. And many devotees, they couldn't handle it. They had a whole different conception what Krishna consciousness should be, how devotees should act, and so on and so. And but Aindra had his, he had his conviction in himself, and Srila Prabhupada, and the philosophy, how he understood it from Prabhupada actually very deeply. And never mind the externals. People may not like he was going on with this Kirtan. And I was told that sometimes he would lead Tulsi Puja in New York, and devotees would just leave. They couldn't stand it. And then later on, when he became world famous by his Kirtan, he says, we couldn't believe this is Aindra. He changed so much. I mean, he was always a musician, but it wasn't a musical talent that he was known for. He was known for, uttering every single syllable of the holy name with so much depth, and with so much focus and concentration that and with so much genuine, affection and care, for the holy name, for Krishna, that just touched everybody's heart.
Bahulastami, which is like the 8th day of Kartik, the Braj Mandal Parikram came to Radhakund, and as far as I remember, we lived at Radhakund for like 3 days, and did our Govardhan Parikrams, and heard about, Govardhan and Radhakund, and so on. And so, I was maybe like 20, and I had never taken a bath in Radhakund, and we'd heard a lot about, what that's about. Anyway, on Bahulastami night, I took my very first bath in Radhakund for the first time in my life at like midnight. And at that time, still, the ISKCON has that Gopalji Mandir, which is generally run by disciples of Swarup Damodar Maharaj. At that time, Mahanidhi Maharaj did not have the nice ashram that he has now, and he would stay there most of the time. And so I remember Mahanidhi Maharaj was there, and so, if you've been to Bahulastami, it's like a huge, intense crowd, although back then I think it was nothing compared to what it is now. So a friend and I, we needed a place to kind of store our bags and keep our clothes, and so we naturally put it in the Gopalji Mandir. And just were in our gumshas or something, and we were able to take our baths. And then when we went back to the Gopalji Mandir, it was definitely after midnight because we had already taken our bath. And Aindra Prabhu was there leading Kirtan with Madhava. And there was maybe 15, 20 devotees in the room. And, and I remember the way it was lit was very kind of mystical. There's like one light coming off the altar. And there's Aindra Prabhu. He didn't have a harmonium, he had wampers. And he wasn't sitting or standing, he was kind of like crouching, kind of like an Indian guy. And he just like, the way he sang, I just remember it was just like with this, his head kind of back and forth, and that's the best I can do to imitate it. He was using like body language, like it was incredibly like an emotional thing. And Madhava was there with like that huge crazy dreadlock and these fierce beats. And musically, especially at that time, it was completely over my head. But it was just like, magnetically attractive and interesting and like inspiring.
The first real encounter when I spoke to him, like in more depth, I went to his room and asked a question. I can't remember the question asked, but it was the afternoon. Late afternoon, I went to his room, asked a question. And when you asked Aindra a question, he would give you an answer, which was like 3-4 hours long. He wasn't a superficial person. And he was like, when he started speaking, he started speaking at one point, which led into another point, which led into another 30 other points. And then at the same time, he was a Paka Brahmachari. His brain was like so, how do you call it, sharp. he would bring you back to the same point you asked, and then the secondary point, the third, and he would just, wave it together in such a way that it completely made sense, and it was interrelated, and at the same time it was so deep that you never heard an explanation in going so deep. So it was fascinating. It was just so fascinating listening to him. So one in the afternoon, and I came out, it was like after midnight, and I didn't know how to get out of the temple because the Guru called the doors were locked, and it was like, what the hell has happened? It's that first encounter, And he gave me this Mahaprasadam, this smell like hing, like anything, and he had this special hing and haldi, and anyways, the whole room had this smell, and his rugged clothes. He didn't care about his externals. Sometimes people will criticize him for his, his Flintstone outfit and this kind of stuff. And he said that, yes, I dress like this, and if people will judge me because of my externals, then I want those people to avoid me. Therefore, I'm going to dress like this. Anybody who wants to know me should come to my room and speak to me like man to man, I'm available, and I'm ready there to sit and talk with you. So he was like that.
I was a relatively new devotee. My faith was quite soft and new, and I had sacrificed a tremendous amount to go into the temple, at least for me. Like, I managed to upset my whole family. I dropped out of a band that, seemed kind of promising and ended up actually doing some interesting stuff after I left. I left my first girlfriend, who I was so attached to. And that Brajmandal Parikram was austere. And I remember thinking in those days, I was thinking why am I so fanatic? I should just, go back to college. I could probably get back with my girlfriend. Maybe I could, play with the band for a little while again. I should just be a regular guy that goes to the Sunday feast. Why am I being so hyper about this? That's what I kind of was feeling at that time. Was, kind of like Krishna consciousness is great, but I don't know that I'm ready to really sacrifice and surrender. So anyway, just so you understand my mind. So then I took bath in Radha Kund, with as much respect and humility as hopefully as I was capable of. And then we came back to that temple, and then Aindra Prabhu with just this passionate, powerful kirtan. And at one point, I remember this very clearly in the kirtan, and it's an experience that I feel like I've never had again. Because he was sitting down and Madhava was sitting down, it was kind of natural to sit down. And so, we were sitting down, and it was just so powerful and attractive. And at one point, when the tempo and it kind of came to a higher crescendo, it was practically, it was not possible to stay down anymore. It was some kind, I'm not so sentimental that I talk like this usually, but it was just some energy forced me to my feet, and not just me, but the entire room. And it was just this total, powerful ecstasy. And that kirtan was just this powerful, roaring, amazing, it was a life-changing experience. And at that point, it became very, very clear to me immediately. I just completely switched off any hesitation and any kind of doubts and things that I had. And I just thought, whatever it took to be here, whatever sacrifices I had to make, it was 100% worth it. And this is exactly where I need to be. And whatever it is that those guys, meaning Aindra and Madhava, whatever they did, whatever sacrifices they made, whatever austerities they performed, whatever music they took the trouble to learn, that's what I need to be doing. That's what my life is about. That's what it's for. This is what I want in my life. It was very, very clear to me.
And after I returned to New York, after 6 months, experiencing that, my subtle body was changed. My mind, intelligence, everything was sold out. I'm going to Vrindavan. That's my only goal. There's nothing else important exists. This is the only thing I want to do. And, the temple president, manager, did a managerial view of things. I was, I guess, good manpower and steady income. Although I wasn't like a big income, for the temple, but I was doing Kirtan book distribution to my best ability, up and down. Was never been a big shot, but he didn't like the idea, and I didn't know what's going to happen. I cannot go back to Vrindavan. Aindra's expecting me, wants me, and sending me messages, while my authorities, direct authorities, they don't like that idea. My spiritual master, he's not sure what's going on. Let's give it a little time. And 2 or 3 times a week, I would dream I'm in Vrindavan. I'm sitting with Aindra doing Kirtan. Because I was like, I was totally there. There's nothing existed in my mind. Sometimes a boy falls in love with a girl falls in love with a boy. They can't think about anything else. Cannot see anything else. Just her. Or, I was like that. Basically, I fall in love with Aindra. And I couldn't perform my Sankirtan. I went out in the streets, and it was just like tears rolling on my cheeks, and I was all there, standing there with books, I was like totally devastated, and people walk up to me, what's wrong? And I said, why don't you take a book? Okay, I can help you out. If it helps, I'll buy a book for you. Anyway, so then my spiritual master, he saw that I was for real, the desire to go to Vrindavan actually was genuine. And he says, maybe you should go to Vrindavan, otherwise you're just a mess.
Well, one thing is, I kind of remember after, we're all kind of leaving the temple, and I just remember kind of being at the top step and standing next to Aindra Prabhu, and he just kind of, because I'd only heard him sing, and he had the way he sang a lot of times was kind of like a low larynx singer. He didn't sing Hare Krishna. He's like Hare Krishna. It was with a deep kind of boom to his voice. So, but then when he spoke, I just remember thinking he was just, I just remember, after this, Hare Krishna, I can't imitate his singing, obviously, so I shouldn't even try. But just this heavy, rich, thick singing voice, singing Hare Krishna. And then we're at the top step of the Gopalji Mandir, and he's just kind of with a very kind of different tone in his speaking voice, he's just wow, there's really a lot of people out there. And I just remember being so struck by that. First of all, that this guy that that is capable of, exhibiting one of the most incredible musical experiences I've ever, experienced. But then just afterwards, he's kind of an unassuming, nice guy. And he talks kind of like anybody else, kind of. That was just also just interesting, it was enough interesting to me that I'll never forget it. It just registered. Okay. And so the other thing I want to say about this story is that years later, I became better friends with Gopal, the Mridanga player, who ended up being Aindra Prabhu's one of his main Mridanga players for many years, and is now the head of the Kirtan department. So Gopal and Gopal came to New York at one point, which I lived there for many years. And so at one point we were just talking, and I said, how'd you get into Kirtan? Like, what was it about Kirtan? When did you know, like, this is what you were into? Or, what got you inspired to do this? And he said, well, everything changed on one particular night. It was on Bahulastami in Kartik in 1998 at a Kirtan at Radhakund after the midnight bathing. By the way, that's another thing. And years later, Aindra Prabhu would do Bahulastami Kirtans before midnight, and I did go to a couple of those in more recent years. One thing that was maybe extra special about that Kirtan was every single person in that Kirtan had just taken a bath in Radhakund at, maybe the most auspicious time of the entire year to bathe in Radhakund. That's something powerful. So, how often are you in that Kirtan? Everyone just took a Bahulastami midnight bath in your Kirtan, That combined with, the Shakti that Aindra has, it was really something special. So I asked Gopal, so, when did you get into Kirtan? Everything changed for me on one particular Kirtan on Bahulastami in 1998. Aindra Prabhu and Madhava playing Mridanga at the Gopalji Mandir after the midnight bathing. What? You were at that Kirtan too? And he says, yeah, that night changed everything. Right after that Kirtan, I thought to myself, okay, this is what it's all about for me. I got to get serious about the Mridanga. I want to join the 24-hour Kirtan. This is what my life is for. He also told me two other things. He said, after that Kirtan, Aindra Prabhu left that Kirtan and said, that is the best Kirtan I've ever been in my entire life. Think about that, because it's not like Aindra didn't spend much time in Kirtan. He spent all his time in Kirtan. So for him to make a comment like that, and he also told me just something kind of funny, which was that Mahanidhi Maharaj made a comment like, I think we saw the full manifestation of Aindra Prabhu's Gopi Deha in that Kirtan.
The living entity has a relationship with Krishna where Krishna reciprocates whatever tiny little mustard seed of love we can offer to Krishna. Krishna reciprocates that unlimitedly, So when we are fall in love with someone, we expect that love. It's not coming. Something's limited coming, especially in the material world. It's conditioned, give and take. We as long as you're beautiful, I will love you. As long as you're rich, I will love you, and all those kind of things. So it's contaminated. And so when Aindra was opening his mouth in front of Radha Shyam Sundar, you could experience that original love. Maybe I don't dare to say it was Krishna Prema, but it was definitely in the stages above, definitely. In the temple room, he didn't exhibit many of the symptoms, but up in his room, he would talk about Krishna, and he was just break down crying. He couldn't control his emotions and his feelings. He felt so much separation, and he was so sad, heartbroken. And he was just like, wow, And those devotees who were there, this is, the sadhu, this is actually what sadhu sangha is supposed to be. When you see this and you experience this, then it will leave an impression on your subtle body and will awaken your soul, When I actually started doing the Kirtan service, it was a whole different thing. It was a whole different world. And in fact, when later on was preaching to me, you should move to Vrindavan and come, help me and this and that. He was telling me that, when I moved to Vrindavan, my spiritual life has started. It's like, what is he talking? He's been a devotee for 15 years when he moved to Vrindavan, But when I moved to Vrindavan, I understood what he was talking about. It's a totally different experience. It's a totally different stage of devotional service. And anyone comes to Vrindavan and takes it seriously, Krishna will give him a glimpse into, the sweet side of Braj, and what is actually becoming attracted and following in the footsteps of the Brajabasis. He will give a taste for that and understanding for that. Anyone who makes that step, And it's available in the West also, but just in my personal experience, I don't think Krishna will give it so freely, But I think Vrindavan is very dear to Krishna, Radharani. And anyone who makes the decision and has so much love for Vrindavan, he automatically inherits that right. So it comes. Aindra Prabhu was telling me, that Radharani is the Mula mantras. She's showing an altar. You see the two mantras. And what is actually Pan Seva? She's giving Pan to Shyam Sundar. On the other hand, like this, when she's showing, he says this Mula mantra means be introspective. Look within yourself. Who are you? Because, Aindra Prabhu would come down for class. That's not enough. Respect of him, And he would sit in the back, and he would love to, like either comment me or somebody else, like in your ear, like, and is commenting about what he hears in class and what actually the philosophy is. A whole different perspective and approach, much deeper approach, And, he would say, yes, I'm not this body, but if I'm not this body, what body am I? That's the natural question. So he says, that's the reason Radharani is showing this mantra, this look within, who are you?
One thing is, it's very difficult to put into words, like the electricity of that man. Like he just had this energy to him. Like going into his room, it was like the coolest place in the whole world. Because he just had this man was just fully on fire for Krishna consciousness. So it's just very exciting and and he just has this type of personality. He was not exactly like a soft, gentle, sweet sadhu. He was really an intense kind of sharp person. So, so he's reading from Jaiva Dharma, and a few comments that I remember from that room conversation was he was reading kind of one section about the process of Krishna consciousness, how a devotee elevates through different stages, probably by beginning with hearing from the Shastra. And so he's reading about hearing the Shastra and the importance of hearing the Shastra and different aspects of reading from Shastra, different types of reading from the Shastra, and how, more and more that will enliven the devotee and bring the devotee to a higher and higher standard of Krishna consciousness. And at that time, one of the very, very important leaders in the Hare Krishna movement, just within a few months prior to that, someone with a huge number of disciples, a huge amount of influence, I won't say the name, but that person had fallen down, had left their position, and that was a source of huge, it was a huge calamity for the ISKCON society. And, in situations like that, that's when Ritvik ideas and gurus outside of ISKCON, it all becomes there's, it's more clamor and talk about these things, and criticism of ISKCON becomes greater, and confusion and bewilderment, and, people's faith being hurt, and that. Actually, it was very, very prominent at that time. And so Aindra Prabhu was reading about, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talking about all these progressive stages of hearing. And he just, with his, kind of like crooked glasses at the tip of his nose, he kind of just looks up and he goes, "No ISKCON politics, please." And that was kind of a funny one. And the other comment I remember was he's reading a description about the beauty of Krishna. And it's meant to be like a very attractive, beautiful description. And, Krishna's like this, and these lips, and these eyes, and, the flute, and the peacock feather, and the beautiful dhoti, and Vaijayanti garland, this type of beautiful description. And then at one point, he just kind of like looks at us with like this heavy intensity, because there's like 3 or 4 of us in the room. You can imagine like myself, Bhagavad Purana, Govinda, maybe one other. And he like looking around at all of us, and he goes, they say that man is made in the image of God. But they're certainly not very good images, are they? And I just remember, me and Govinda just kind of like looked at each other, and I'm sure we were both thinking the same thing, was like, we're a couple of ugly dudes.
Sometimes they will tell Aindra Prabhu, "Dad, why are you so attached to this Vrindavan? Prabhupada said we should go out and preach and all these things." And then he was telling me, "What do you mean I'm not preaching here? You see what I'm doing? People every day, they're dancing. Hundreds of people dancing and chanting. I think that's pretty good preaching, isn't it? And they were saying, oh, we Gostinanandi and Bhajananandi, and you're a Bhajananandi, and Prabhupada, said we should be Gostinanandis. Are you telling me I'm not preaching? Bhajanandis, they like to do their bhajan in a secluded place. You call this seclusion? I mean, sometimes it's so crowded, you go into the temple, you can't get out. You have a hard time to get in. Once you get in, it's impossible to get out. You get stampeded. It's dangerous. It's not secluded bhajan. I wish I had, some seclusion, have some peace of mind. No Indian street noise. And he was accused. Why don't you go preach in the West? And his point was, first, do your internal cultivation, Krishna consciousness. And then when you have achieved something, to some limit, some merit you have, then you can go out and preach. Then you should go out and preach. Otherwise, you're preaching, what effect will it have?
He was very much like a fan of the, of Indian style, or like the Occidental style. And so he learned, to my best understanding, the style of kirtan that he was singing, you can call it Bengali bhajan style, because of the styles of alankar, like the way he's ornamenting the way he's ornamenting like the mantra in in this kirtan. It's like very typical of Bengali bhajan style. That's what you would call it. It's not like a straight classical form. It's a bhajan form. And if you'll listen to like the trained, good Bengali kirtan singers, you can understand, okay, this is what Aindra was trying to do. And he did it very, very well, no doubt. And so he told me, he said, when the Indian people, because if you know Krishna Balaram Mandir, there's hundreds of pilgrims flocking through there a day. Indian people, that when they take darshan of the deities, and then when they turn around to look at the kirtan party, they're surprised to see that it's a white man leading the kirtan. And he said, and that's a very impressive thing for them, to see that a white man has really embraced their style and their culture, and they really appreciate that.
I said, this man just revolutionized my whole intelligence, my mind about Krishna consciousness. And it just inflamed, my God, I never heard anybody speaking like this. I never, and because Aindra was on fire, this man was on fire. Never seen anybody in my life who was so passionate. He was extremely intense, extremely passionate. But the beautiful thing was about it that he wasn't, like a lusty passion. He was 100% passionate for Krishna. 100% lusty, I could say, for Krishna. Of course, it's not lust; it's the reverse effect of lust. Real love. That's what love is. Only he was so passionate to be attracted by Krishna, and serve Krishna, give him pleasure any way he can, and I used to say many people came to him, wanted to be his disciples, and he was like, I'm not going to be a disciple, and I'm not going to be a spiritual master, and because I'm not qualified. He was very, very humble. That's a whole other subject, but he didn't want to accept any disciples. He said at first, he says, before I start taking disciples, I want to make a deal with my Nitai Sachi Sutta, that first they have to give me prema. Krishna prema and Gaura prema. If they give me that, and I want to stand in front of Krishna, face to face, eye to eye, cheek to cheek, and so on. He said other things, but it's X-rated. But he was dead. After that, I just want to experience once. He says, I know I'm greedy and selfish, but at least I want to experience.
My friend was taking a bath. Aindra was also taking a shower at one point. And at one point, Aindra just kind of pulled the curtain back and he said, you have to choose. Do you want Krishna or do you want vagina? You have to make a choice. You can't have both. Something like that. So, another classic from years ago, many, many years ago. I came into his room. This is all like the fired up Brahmachari Katha of Aindra Prabhu. I came into his room and he just says to me, why do we call them Matajis? He said, well, what is a mother? Mataji means mother. What is a mother? A mother is the source of birth. And just like it says in Bhagavad Gita, for one who is born, death is sure. So, what is a Mataji really but the personification of the cycle of birth and death? And the more intimately you will be associated with any Mataji, is the more intimately you will be associated with the cycle of birth and death. That is why we call them Matajis. Don't mind, Haribol, don't be offended. He also told me that time, just a few comments. He was like, he said, for a lusty man, even a hole in the wall looks good. And he said, a lusty man is always very eager to know that a woman is unmarried, because that makes her potentially enjoyable by him. He told me once, to me, renunciation is just chastity. He's like, just if a man is married to a woman, it's expected that neither of them are permitted to go outside of that relationship for any type of romantic intimacy. It's not that just because you're married, you're allowed to just go anywhere and everywhere. The system is you have one person. You're expected to remain chaste. So renunciation is really not that different. Basically, I have my relationship with Krishna and I don't go anywhere else. So something like that.
There was a fatherly figure, actually, with many of the people, like us young kids who would come around. And not that I needed a father or anything, it's not a psychological thing, you know. It was just so genuine, you know, the relationship that he offered to people. It was so real. You know, you can understand that this guy, this man is real, you know. He wasn't faking it. You know, when you saw him sad, he was sad. When he felt happy, he was happy external. He was always real, never faked himself, you know. That was him.
One time, you know, some different devotees were talking about, you know, it's very, you know, we should be very careful about staying in Vrindavan if we have any type of material desires, because there's every risk of making offenses to Vrindavan, and we should, you know, only come here for a short time. And there's quotes from Srila Prabhupada that are in that vein. And Aindra Prabhu, just kind of to balance the discussion, because they were very much in the mood like, we should serve Prabhupada, you know, he didn't just want people to stay in Vrindavan, and, you know, we shouldn't, you know, just kind of indulge in staying in Vrindavan. That was kind of the thing. And it's so easy to make offenses here. You're just going to make offenses. And that was the point. It kept being, you know, if you're not advanced, you're just going to make so many offenses here. And so then Aindra kind of balanced that discussion with a very beautiful comment. He said, actually, the biggest offense to Vrindavan Dham is to leave Vrindavan Dham once you've attained Vrindavan Dham. And he said, the only legitimate reason to leave Vrindavan Dham is if one is going out of Vrindavan with the purpose of preaching the glories of Vrindavan.
Back in the 90s, we had many really cool devotees around. And after Kirtan in the evening, we were up in Aindra's room. And Aindra was just going on and on, was talking about Krsna. And we were reading, Ram Roy would like read from Bhagavatam or one of the Goswami's books, you know, some Krishna Lila. And Aindra was just like going and talking about it. And just the philosophy. And all brought it back to Prabhupada, you know, Prabhupada's teachings, and, you know, basic verses of Bhagavad Gita, you know, which actually he put a new light on those verses, a new perspective, and those days, I mean, he would go on, I think, 1 o'clock at night, and we were in there and just like talking, getting hotter and hotter and more intense, and we had. Sometimes he was like goofing around and mimicking other devotees and things I didn't like about, you know, neophytes and how they act. And I don't want to repeat things, but it was hilarious. And those are the best years in my life.
One devotee, he was a Russian brahmachari, and Aindra was unbelievably heavy with him all the time. You know, I remember one time he was on the 7 to 10 morning shift, and after the Bhagavatam class, the Kirtan is meant to start immediately. The Kirtan department members are meant to be chanting japa during the Bhagavatam class and other programs, and then as soon as the class is over, the Kirtan should begin, because it's, you know, a Khanda Kirtan. And so this devotee, he was probably chanting the name, and so it wasn't that he'd broken the kirtan, but the microphone and so on, it wasn't really set up like so, it wasn't totally ready right after the Bhagavatam class, so that when the, you know, the speaker said, you know, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai or whatever, and ended the thing, he wasn't really ready. Like, I mean, he was pretty much ready, but it wasn't like exactly at that minute. And it was this one brahmachari, and Aindra just yelled at him, like in the whole, like loudly, so that everyone in the temple room was hearing, and he was just like, you know, what is this nonsense? Minutes are going by after the Bhagavatam class and the Kirtan still hasn't started. This is an embarrassment to me. You're embarrassing me in front of my god brothers. It was like, and this poor devotee, he's trying to set it up. It was very, very, moments like that really made me afraid of Aindra, honestly. There was another time, this same devotee, it was the summer, and this devotee was getting so many boils. And like I said, boils are very, very painful. And this brahmachari, frankly, was a very good devotee. And he was like a real brahmachari in the sense that he was destitute. He had nothing. He was doing his seva very, very faithfully, and he was just completely dependent on the temple for his food and shelter, and that was his whole life. This guy was like impressively kind of detached and renounced, and that's all his life was, and much better than me. And I just remember one time this devotee came into Aindra Prabhu's room while I was there and asked Aindra for something like 50 rupees, like next to nothing, for some medicine for his boils. And before giving him the money, Aindra really chewed him out. Why are you getting these boils? It is only because of your offenses to Vrindavan.
I guess he saw something in me. I was very rude and crude, I'm still not very good, compared to these guys, Vrindavan or Madhava. But Aindra had to tolerate me for 5 years. And he told me many times, what he didn't like about my Mridanga playing, and I had to adjust, even though I didn't want to. But he had to. He was not a person to say no to. If you wanted to be happy, you had to keep Aindra happy. You don't want to mess with Aindra. Not advisable. One time I told him, Aindra Prabhu, your Kirtan was like a football match, because I'm from Europe, so they have football games there, people chanting, and then because I thought it was really heavy, and then I prefer the older Kirtans, which were sweet at nighttime, and sweet and slow and beautiful. And but there was one side of Aindra, and he told me, I can't sing lullabies anymore. My voice is damaged, it's finished. I cannot do the Kirtan. And so when I told him that, your Kirtan is like a football game, crowd, then he was very upset. Next day he came down, he grabbed the Mridanga from my lap, and he says, His Royal Highness is not qualified to play the Mridanga. And he just, give it to the first guy. And of course he couldn't play Mridanga. But anyway, we had these leelas sometimes, one other thing, when I started coming around, before I joined the party in the early 90s, I was playing the gong one time, and I was a new devotee, and he was soft and gentle, but he was telling me, this is not how you play it. Between was, he had the lead Kirtan, and was trying to instruct me how to do it, just like one. And either I didn't register in my brain, I can't remember, or I was just oblivious to, and he was telling me, but I didn't understand. But I kept going wrong, and he told me 2 times. And the 3rd time, he just grabbed the gong and just threw it into the courtyard. So dang, lang, lang, somewhere in the back of the courtyard in the marble. Some old lady brought it back, and they were just cracking up. He was upset, just lightning in his eye, and but I couldn't get offended by him. It was just hilarious. The man was hilarious. Then he also cracked up, and it was just it was he had many leelas like this.
But there was one time I was kind of struggling in certain ways, and struggling means I was probably, whatever. My mind, I was agitated, something, and I went to Aindra Prabhu and said, Prabhu, can you please preach to me? And he just was like, what's wrong? Are you in Maya? And I just said, yes. And I was like, kind of what I was asking for was like, please yell at me and please tell me like I'm such a demon and that I'm an offender and that, you know, I'm just a disgrace. And like, I was I was kind of asking for that. And he just, you know, when I just said yes, that I'm in Maya, I just remember he just got like this look on his face of like pity. And he was just kind of like, and then he just like, he didn't say anything and he just went back to his deity worship. And he was just kind of like, you know, like just sit here. And like, I just like sat in his room while he was worshiping his deities. And after a couple minutes, I just kind of felt like, wow, thanks. Actually, it's just nice to sit here with you in your room, even if, you know, you're not in a mood to like yell at me or something. And he just, you know, so he gave me shelter, I felt like, in a different way. I mean, I remember very, like, at that time especially, I really was very touched by that. Like, just the way he dealt with me, something very expert about the way he dealt with me that I, you know, he really, like, made me love him, basically.
Yeah, he chewed at everybody, and he loved it. He loved it. Do it in public. I love to do it in public, to humiliate you, to get his point across, you know, so that he'll have more impact. And one time his devotee was singing. He was a short devotee from New York, and without describing the devotee, Aindra Prabhu came down because he heard a kirtan in his radio upstairs in his room. And he's yelling at him. He says, you know, he was from your kirtan is like a cat, you know, crying out, for, you know, meowing for a mate on the top of the roof. You know. And Aindra said that he broke down crying. It was finished. Kirtan was finished. He was devastated. So Aindra was like that. He would, you know, sometimes people were afraid of him, and they just sit around. You know, the first time they came to Vrindavan, or second time, then they sit there like, oh my God, this guy is like, you know. And they were too afraid to sing, and or they couldn't even follow the tune because they never heard kirtan like this. You know, it wasn't like a Western kirtan, you know, with the same line forever and then forever again. You know, he had, because he was saying that my kirtan is like just like you see a clip on MTV, right? And they showed all these flashes of these different scenes, you know, and all this woman and all this, and then you want to check her out, but there's not enough time to check her out because, you know, the next flash comes in a no scene, right? And then, so he said, I'm changing beats and lines and parts of different kirtans so I can keep the attention of the devotees. You know, otherwise, sometimes when you repeat the same thing again and again, you know, people start scratching the floor and looking all over the place and yawning. So it's like, so to keep the attention, just a technique.
And he told me about his preaching in New York in the 80s. And because I know New York City very well, he was kind of telling me about, you know, we'd go to like 6th Avenue and 4th Street. There's like a basketball court there. And he told me how he would do his kirtan there. And how he'd go to Queens on the weekend because there's a very large Indian community there. He said he'd make several $100s in a day. You know, he had his truck, and he said he'd set up his amplifiers. And he said while I was setting everything up, the first thing I would do is I would put on a tape of Shehnai music. And, you know, it had like kind of like an Indian flavor to it. And he said, just from having that tape on, I'd get a wall of people completely interested in what was going on, and I'd attract donations, and we'd be selling books just before the thing was even set up, just with the Shehnai music. That was pretty cool. So, yeah, I asked him, I was like, Prabhu, if I get a chance in my life, can I come back here again? He's very subtle. He's like, yeah. I said, you did great. And then, the night before I was leaving, it was a very, very kind of intense thing. He just looked at me at one point and he's like, how can you leave? You belong here now. That's like the type of comment that'll always stay with you. He felt like Aindra told me I belong here. I belong in Vrindavan. That means a lot. How can you go back to that horrible place? I just remember, coming into JFK and just like looking at all like the people there. It's just like such a depressing scene. How can you even tolerate it like that?
Because back then in the 90s, early 90s, it wasn't like a big Aindra, fan club scene. We were doing Kirtan, maybe like 5 or 10 people sitting there. It was a totally different mood. It was very sweet, and there was no, you didn't have to perform to the crowd, for the crowds and all this thing. And it was more, not that Aindra would do any shows later, but for the sake of preaching, he would take the kirtan off the ground to get the crowds clapping and dancing. So I would say it was more intimate. The kirtans were more intimate. Later on, he would just come down and just rock the house. And that was it. He liked to rock the house.
At one point, my Guru Maharaj and I, we wanted to purchase a set of Radha Krishna deities. He wanted to give them to there were some couples in upstate New York that had a small community, and my Guru Maharaj wanted to encourage them. And so he wanted to purchase some very special, beautiful Radha Krishna deities. And so my Guru Maharaj and I, we were a little bit picky about, we wouldn't kind of settle for deities. We wanted to find something special, I think. And we did find something, I think, very, very beautiful, special deities. They were wooden, and they had a very kind of unique charm and character to them. And so my Guru Maharaj said, I want to show them to Aindra. Let's see what he thinks. So, and they were wrapped kind of just in this white cloth, very simply. They weren't dressed, but they had this white cloth around them. And so we brought them up to Aindra Prabhu, and he was on the veranda, and we were, what do you think, Aindra Prabhu? And he was just kind of silent, and he was examining them very intensely. And then at one point, he just started taking all the cloth off them. It's kind of like, and it was really like he's gonna really take all the cloth off, they don't have anything on under there. He's really gonna take it off. You could see my Guru's face, he was a little like kind of, and Aindra took everything off both of the deities, that they were just completely in their natural uncovered form. And Aindra just says, wow, they are completely in the nude. he said, you might want to get them painted. I mean, unless the person worshiping them is on a very stellar platform of Krishna consciousness. I mean, if I was worshiping them, I wouldn't paint them. And my Guru Maharaj said, you just started laughing. He said, I know you wouldn't.
And my service was that after Mangalarti, I would go out and go to these different places in Vrindavan and collect flowers. I had this big bamboo rod with this little thing on the end. I was cutting these beautiful flowers and collecting wild flowers. I would go on the altar, and I would dress Radharani, rather than just clothes on my face, flowers and Shamsundar and paint her. And I did it for years, and so Aindra brought me into that realm. And he gave me Vrindavan, basically. Everything.
There's once, I don't remember, he was kind of revealing to me, that he was kind of suffering under management. They were giving him stress and pressure, and he was just like. And this was, by the way, see, he made a speech in the Prabhupada disappearance of 2009, and things got very difficult for him after that. But this was definitely long before that. But he was still saying, I'm suffering under the management. He said, sometimes I just think about, taking the Kirtan party and just getting our own place, moving to another ashram, doing something else, or something like that. And then he said, and this was like classic Aindra, he was like, but I've decided that I'm committed to staying in Srila Prabhupada's institution for at least 50 years, so that when I have to see Srila Prabhupada again, I can say, well, Srila Prabhupada, at least I managed to stay in your institution for 50 years.
Sometimes they will tell Aindra Prabhu, Dad, why are you so attached to this Vrindavan? Prabhupada said we should go out and preach and all these things. And then he was telling me, what do you mean, I'm not preaching here? You see what I'm doing? People, every day, they're dancing, hundreds of people, dancing and chanting. I think that's pretty good preaching, isn't it? And they were saying, oh, we Gostinanandi and Bhajananandi, and you're a Bhajananandi, and Prabhupada, said we should be Gostinanandis. Are you telling me I'm not preaching? Bhajanandis, they like to do their bhajan in a secluded place. You call this seclusion? I mean, sometimes it's so crowded. You go into the temple, you can't get out. You have a hard time to get in. Once you get in, it's impossible to get out. You get stampeded. It's dangerous. It's not secluded bhajan. I wish I had, some seclusion, have some peace of mind. No Indian street noise.
He was very picky about who he liked as a mridanga player. So this devotee, at one point, Aindra kind of made a comment to him like, you're not catching it, or you're not getting my mood, or something. And he said something like, I'm sorry, Prabhu, I'm just used to doing more casual type of kirtan. And so Aindra always harped on that phrase of casual kirtan. And there was one time where he was up on the veranda, and he talked to me like for so long. Because, we kind of had a team of guys, and he felt like he wasn't getting 100% from everybody. So he was, meeting us about this, and he took me aside once, and he's like, so-and-so's talking about casual kirtan. We don't do casual kirtan here. We only do serious kirtan. It's very, very serious what we're doing, or something like that. And he just went on and on and on, and this is serious, and I need people's help. I need your full participation, and I need your full chanting and your focus, and and he was all this thing, and I just kind of yes, I'm sorry, Prabhu, I said, and now I really feel it. But what I said at the time was something like, Prabhu, I feel like we're taking this for granted. I feel like we're taking you for granted, and we're taking the opportunity that we have for granted.
They told me that one time this devotee was on a night shift, and I think it was an Indian devotee, and it was a little puffy, it was a little puffed up. So I told him that, the basic instrument we want to use is the mridanga, the first number one instrument is mridanga and kartals. And then you have more manpower, then you can play a harmonium. But this devotee was in love with this harmonium playing and singing, It was like so many devotees we see, they're intoxicated with themselves, And then they swallow the microphone, and it's just so loud you want to leave the temple room, because it's just... And not enough that it's loud, but it's the false ego coming through. You're going to like this, you're going to swallow it, and you're going to like it. It's my kirtan is the best. Anyway, so the devotee was so full of his kirtan, and he wouldn't listen to Aindra. He didn't obey the instruction that please play the mridanga. And he was on the night shift, and Aindra would go down time to time, sometimes checking, and this devotee was playing the harmonium. No mridanga. And Aindra Prabhu, just ask you, Prabhu, play the mridanga, please. And he did a mistake. He talked back to Aindra. he said, well, this is my mridanga. He pointed to the harmonium. You know? Like, this is my mridanga. And I said, yes? Okay, I show you what I think of your mridanga. He picked up the mridanga, the harmonium, just threw that in the courtyard. It's like, just broke to pieces.
You know, one of the first kirtans that I was in, I was just there chanting in the evening, and then Gopal comes up to me and said, Akincana, Aindra's coming down, and you're going to play mridanga for him. I said, what? You know, why isn't anybody else here to do it? I can't do that. And he said, listen, you're the only one. There's nobody here, and I'm sick. The doctor told me I can't play right now, so I can't play, so you're the only one. You're going to do it. And I was like, that was a first. And I was not, I was really like, I was super nervous, because I understood the standard, and I knew that I was not there yet. And so I sat down to play the mridanga, and I remember a few people just kind of like looking at me like, really? This guy, you know? I remember Purnachandra Maharaj, who at the time was Purnachandra Prabhu. I remember, you know, he was very, very committed coming to Aindra Prabhu's kirtan all the time. And then in that and he kind of knew me, and I just remember the look on his face, you know, he just kind of was like, huh, like, you know, like, really, you're going to play the mridanga for Aindra? And, so, you know, I was really, like, humble about it. And, again, Aindra, who could be the heaviest, he was so cool to me. He was just, like, he was kind of, like, so gentle. He started with, like, a slow two-tal, and whatever kind of stupid, lame beat I had, you know, I did my best to play. Gopal told me afterwards that like 1 or 2 mantras into the kirtan, you know, with my whatever bink, bink, bonk, bonk beat going on, Aindra just turns to Gopal and goes, no, Bhav.
Devotees, many people misunderstood him. And they didn't take the energy or the courage or whatever, I don't know what's lacking in them. Or they're just right out envious. It's natural, and it's a law that when you become powerful and you have something real, something very powerful, and he had something very powerful that actually nobody could take away from him. He had it, you know. It was like no matter what happens in the world, happens in his life or anybody, he will have this. He would have had it, that Krishna consciousness. So. You know, his external appearance and his eccentric. He was eccentric. We all know that. He was admitting himself. His behavior and, anyway, so many things. It would give a reason to others to criticize him and complain about him, you know. But they didn't actually come to him and see where he was coming from. You know, in reality, because when you talk to the man, he could see that he was like humility personified. He would go. He was only devotee living in the brahmacharya ashram, only Prabhupada disciple living in the brahmacharya ashram. We all just upstarts, basically, you know. And this man, he would go to the bathroom and clean the toilets with acid. Not just for a show. He would go there at midnight and do it, you know, regularly. He would do that. One time he told me on Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, all the Prabhupada's disciples were in the temple room, speaking their, you know, leelas with Prabhupada and their experiences in their physical bodies and whatever. And Aindra Prabhu's, my offering is, you know, I'm going to clean the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, got on the ladder, it was just like cleaning the walls and the doors and pissoirs and everything stove here. Indian bathrooms, they're not so hygienic.
He gave this fire. I wish it was recorded. There's so many things with Aindra Prabhu I wish were recorded. He gave his fire class on verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Asat Sangatyage Vaishnavachar. Vaishnav means someone who does not associate with women and men who are too attached to women. So he's very... because again, he has to get on everybody's case because this was a problem in his ashram. Some of the men were a little bit too loose. And like I said, there's natural challenges in ISKCON Vrindavan, which are not even present in so many other temples, even though it's the place where practically the much higher standard is expected of everybody in that regard. My Guru Maharaj told me, Vrindavan is meant for renunciation, but ironically it's the worst place to be a brahmachari because it's practically where everybody comes internationally to hook up and find a husband or wife. That's the sad reality. So Aindra Prabhu was always kind of struggling with this, and he has to get on everybody's case about this. So he's talking Asat Sangatyage Vaishnavachar and preaching fire and brimstone. Vaishnav means, this is what a Vaishnav means. I remember he said, sometimes people think, I'm a radical, or I'm like, I've got these bizarre ideas. I'm not a radical. I go by Prabhupada's books. I'm just a conservative. And then he honestly, it became very emotional, that meeting, because he was like practically with tears. He was just like, I just want men who are ready to live here with me like Goswamis. And at the time, I looked around the room, and I just my heart kind of bled for him, because I really felt like, God, this man really sacrificed his life, and he just wants to try to realize Srila Prabhupada's vision for a 24-hour kirtan. But frankly speaking, looking around this room, none of us are qualified in the way that Aindra Prabhu, would want us to be, and in the way that Srila Prabhupada would want. Frankly speaking, Aindra was a Goswami, and kind of none of us are.
And even when his body broke down, he would not stop. One time he was on the verge of leaving his body. He was doing Chaturmasya Vrat, and he got dehydrated, and he was just lying there for days. And we couldn't get him to change, to break his vow. And finally, I had to do his deity worship, the shalagrams and everything. And when he understood that maybe it's time to break it, otherwise it's going to be a serious problem. Then he broke it. He drank some glucose, and he came back. And he had jaundice, he had malaria. We all had. Back in the early days, we had no water, no cooler, no AC. We had no drinking water. We had to go down 1 kilometer. And I would bring him water in these big containers. There's one well there. Okay.
There was another thing, the management. I feel horrible. I don't want to talk bad about anybody. I'm just repeating because it's a ras that they had with Aindra. I don't know. They made a rule. They wanted to make a rule that if anyone misses Mangalartik, they won't get prasadam. And so Aindra's comment on that was, by the way, Aindra never ate the devotee prasadam, so practically it didn't matter to him personally. But the principle, he didn't like it. And he said, why do they have to show me the stick? It's like, why do they have to threaten me and make me afraid to try to perform my devotional services? I would just appreciate it so much more if instead of threatening me, they would come to me and say something like, Prabhu, we're really doing our best to pray to the deities, and to pray to Radha Shama Sundar every morning at the Mangal Artik. And we would really appreciate it if you would come and help us, beg for their mercy. And it would just help us a lot if you were to come. So please come to Mangal Artik. But instead they're threatening me. He's like, he didn't like that. And he said, what was Prabhupada's thing? Didn't he have a thing? And then I think I said, yeah, didn't he say you had to sell a Krishna book if you missed the program or something? And, yeah, that's a good one. They can just tell you, if you miss Mangal Artik, you have to sell a Krishna book. Why do they have to tell me I don't get prasadam? and like that. There's something else I wanted to tell about that story. Oh, and then he said, they can be a little bit humble about their programs. This is a heavy comment. They can be a little bit humble about their programs. When Srila Prabhupada was here, nobody had to threaten you that, you have to go to Prabhupada's class. Everybody naturally wanted to go to Prabhupada's class because Prabhupada was such a powerful, self-realized acharya. So if they're having trouble with attendance at their Bhagavatam class, maybe they can be a little bit humble that, if they were more qualified, more people would naturally want to go, that they don't just have to threaten everybody to go. It's a very heavy, powerful comment.
He considered himself a sannyasi, although they didn't give him sannyas. And then the reason was, by the sannyas committee, why he cannot be a sannyasi. He says he's too austere. That was the reason. I won't say names, but anyway. He's too austere, so he's not qualified for sannyas. And so anyway, so he considered himself a sannyasi, and as a sannyasi, he was quoting, this is Mahaprabhu, he didn't allow women coming within 150 feet to pay obeisances. You've read Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu says, he's teaching us by example. He says, when I see a wooden doll, of a woman, my mind becomes agitated. What to speak of us? We come from the West, we don't have to see it. We already have everything in our mind, You just have to turn it on, turn the switch on, and it's there. And what to speak of, seeing women, and not all of them are innocent. So anyway, there's a whole argument goes on,
Anyway, so at one point he came into the room, and he said, "Who here is wearing kopins?" And he kind of got on all of our cases about it, and he asked one of the devotees, "Do you have a girlfriend?" It was so heavy. And so he kind of started with the type of questions that kind of made you nervous. They made me nervous. And then he said a few very, very unforgettable comments. He said, "Listen, it's time to stand up on your own 2 feet and walk this world alone as a man, without all of the coddling and so-called support of a woman. First, these days, they're coddled by their mothers, and then they're coddled by their sisters, and then they're practically handed straight off to get coddled by their wives and their girlfriends and whatever, and they never become men." And then he said, he explained to us the value of kopins. He said, Vrindavan life means sadhu jivan. Vrindavan life means living like a sadhu. This is tapalok. This is not the place, this is the last place for frivolity and for, indulging in mundane life and sensual life. And this is sadhu. This is meant for sadhu jivan. And sadhu jivan means kopan. 6 Goswamis wore kopan. It's said that simply by wearing kopan, 50% of one's lust and sexual desire will be diminished just by wearing the kopan. Another classic, he said, you better tie that thing down or it'll end up dragging you all over the material world. He told us, I was wearing white. Most of the devotees in the room were wearing white. And he said, even a devotee wearing white can wear saffron kopans. There's nothing that says a person wearing white can't wear saffron kopans, and that will help you in your renunciation.
First of all, Aindra was thinking of himself as a woman, as a young girl. So he had no hate against women, And you see in his later, the last years, he was talking to so many women, in a safe zone. But I understood that in his early years of Krishna consciousness, he was totally refraining from the association of women. He told us the story that when he joined Krishna consciousness, how he told his wife that I want to join the Hare Krishnas. Either come with me, or we're done, because I'm going in there, with or without you, I'm going. So come. And she wasn't into it, And Aindra said she was holding onto my leg, Please don't go, please don't go. I haven't enjoyed you enough yet. And he says, when I heard this, I haven't enjoyed it enough yet. It's like, he went to the temple. He says, he was so disgusted, that I went to the temple with the idea I'm going to be a sannyasi. And he stuck to that idea. Because Aindra was always preaching in brahmacharya ashram. Be better if you stay brahmachari. That was his idea. So one Russian brahmachari, he went to Aindra Prabhu in his room, and he said, Aindra Prabhu, my mind, I don't know what to do. I want to get married, or I shouldn't get married. And my mind is, bugging out, it's flipping out. And Aindra's like, he pulled him in like 3-hour brahmachari lecture, And he was way over his head, and he couldn't understand all these topics he was telling him, this brahmachari. And at the end, he was telling him, if you want to associate with women, you associate with me. I'll show you real womanhood, And the dude is like, what? Another story I heard from Kadambakana Maharaj is that one time there was a Christmas marathon, Prabhupada's book distribution marathon, December. And the temple commander or whoever was a German devotee, no compromise. And he gave this class, and it was, book distribution, everybody has to go out. No exception, everybody must go out. And he said that anybody who doesn't go out in December on book distribution is like a woman, which is actually very offensive to women. But anyway, so at the end of the class, Aindra Prabhu says a comment, says, well, some of us in Vrindavan have no problem being a woman. So there was, Aindra, they misunderstood him just because he didn't associate with a woman, especially until the last year. It didn't mean he hated women or anything like that, no.
I remember him, if you know his room, like the front half, he's got the tamal tree, and he's got like a shelf, and he'd had like a ton of clutter and like stuff all over on the side. And And when I first came in, I just remember him laying completely flat on his back on the floor right in front of his deities. And it was like a Kadasi or something like that. And he'd clearly been doing some harsh kind of austerities. It was in Chaturmasya just before Kartik. And it was maybe, I think it was a Kadasi. And yeah, now I remember a few things he said that time. So he's just like laying flat on his back, and I just remember him saying like, I'm supposed to fast from this and that. He's like saying this while he's like on the floor like a corpse. Like, I'm supposed to do this and that, but I just really don't feel like doing that right now. And I mean, anyway, I already took my fisherman's friends while I was singing, and that probably even has grains in it, so I don't know, am I not supposed to count that? Or, does it count and I already ruined the whole thing? Or what? He was kind of in, this, funny kind of thing where he was talking like that. And I said, because I had gotten a certain type of training in Krishna consciousness, so I approached him in a very, very humble way. And in a very, as best I knew, I wanted to be respectful. And I said, Prabhu, is there any service that I can do for you? And he's like, well, how can I accept any service from you? I mean, who's to say that I'm such a pure vessel that if you serve me, that service will go to Krishna? I mean, what if there's some kind of, selfish motive on my part? Then I'm going to have to accept some reaction for your service. And kind of the way he said it, he responded to that in a certain way, but the basic message was kind of don't talk to me like that, and I don't respond to that type of communication. I'm not really into you being a little, minion that's just this docile, servile, somehow he just wasn't into that. And, definitely his tone and his mood was not he wanted to take any service from anybody. The people that did the most service for Aindra were intelligent enough to just do a lot of stuff without asking him and without telling him about it. Those were the smartest people. And to go to him and directly say, is there any service that I can do for you? That was just clearly the wrong way to talk to Aindra. So now I'm thinking, it was probably the same night, I'd come to Vrindavan on Ekadasi, and he said, oh, you just got here? And I said, yeah, I really messed up my travel plans, because I ended up traveling on Ekadasi. And he just was like, oh, I would break any rule to come to Vrindavan.
In the male body, you get this Purusha Abhiman. Purusha, the male enjoyer, and that's Krishna, And Abhiman means mentality, false conception, basically false ego. We are under the false conception that we are the male enjoyer. And every living entity, he was explaining that every living entity is, be it a man or a woman body. But when you're a woman body and you're thinking that you're the male enjoyer, is even more of perverted reflection. Then maybe it's equal, because when you're in the spiritual world, maybe you're a Manjari or a Gopi, but here you're thinking yourself as a male enjoyer in a man body. So male or female, it's all perverted reflection. So he didn't like to bring his consciousness to that mundane platform. He wanted to avoid that. He would say that, because we're all Prakriti, female energy, and female personalities, in the spiritual world, or some of us male, of course. But, we want to enjoy, sex life and in these bodies. But in reality, she's a girl in the spiritual world, and I'm a girl in the spiritual world. It's just two of the girls trying to enjoy sex. It's like we are lesbians. You know?
In the line of Bhakti Siddhanta, it's either a practice that's not done or it's done very, very rarely. That the guru will talk to the disciple and inform the disciple about their siddha deha so that they can meditate on it and advance in their practice of spontaneous devotional service. So one of the criticisms is basically going to be, Rupa Goswami explains, and this is in Srila Prabhupada's books, there's no doubt. There's when describing what is the practice of Raganuga sadhana, and by Raganuga sadhana, it's the only way you can hope to get to Goloka Vrindavan. By Vaidhi sadhana, you'll never get to Goloka Vrindavan. That's very clearly in Srila Prabhupada's books. I'm not making that up. So Rupa Goswami, one of his verses on how to practice Raganuga sadhana is Seva sadhaka rupena, siddha rupena chatrahi. You have to follow the Braja Lok in the siddha deha, and in the sadhak deha and in the siddha deha. So the challenge is basically going to be, in the line of Bhakti Siddhanta, how do you ever, follow the Braja Lok in your siddha deha? And in some other lines, it's the guru tells you your siddha deha, that's how you'll meditate on it. In the line of Bhakti Santa, whoever tells anybody about that. So you're all, just a bunch of Vaidhi Bhaktas. How are you ever going to get to Goloka Vrindavan? So anyway, I hope it wasn't too much to set that up. But I had a ton of questions about this, and Aindra Prabhu and I had a long conversation about this. And he spoke a lot about his own kind of development in Krishna consciousness. He told me that, at one point in his Krishna consciousness, he was telling me that, I think it was happening in the mid-90s, that Srila Prabhupada came to him in dreams and talked to him about his eternal form in the spiritual world. What is his siddha deha? That's different from perfecting, fully realizing yourself in that position. The idea of our acharyas, as far as I humbly understand it, is that at a certain point in the progress of a devotee's devotional service, they may get some understanding of what their siddha deha is so that they can deepen their meditation. Like it says in Bhagavad Gita, whatever you've thought of at the time of death, that's what you'll achieve. So the idea is you'll have to cultivate that siddha deha in order to achieve that type of perfection. So Aindra Prabhu said that Srila Prabhupada revealed those things to him in dreams. He told me, there was a time in my spiritual life where I was so excited to go to sleep because I was just getting so much more realization in my sleep than I was from being awake. And I just remember he answered a lot of my concerns and my doubts in a very, very practical way. And Aindra had he just was completely committed and faithful to Srila Prabhupada. As much as he may look kind of like a real rebel, at the core he was highly committed to Srila Prabhupada and to ISKCON. And so he kind of, he expressed that very, very strongly and in a way that was very, very helpful to me, that there's no doubt you can get everything in this Krishna consciousness movement. And there may be so much more hope to achieve your highest spiritual ideals here. Okay, so the Guru didn't give you some, siddha deha out of a book. How valid is that Guru? How valid is that siddha deha? If you're not chanting Shuddha Nam, your perception of reality is anyway just going to be some distorted abhas, So any of your, cultivation or meditation on the siddha deha is going to be an abhas at best. And the one comment that I really liked that was kind of at the end of our discussion, when because we're kind of coming to points where it's like, there's just a doubt, like, well, how do you resolve this? And I can't understand that. And he just kind of was like, look, we've all had to smoke at the pipe of controversy at some point. And like, I thought that was such a beautiful comment that was just totally off the mental platform, where it was just kind of like, you can get into mental arguments forever, but at the end of the day, you still have to do the work of being Krishna conscious. And I just saw with him that he was, you just look at him, and like, I just appreciated his example, that he understood all these discussions, he understood all these arguments, and he wasn't confused. He was fixed, and he was going 100 miles an hour in his Krishna consciousness, and that's the example. I just appreciated that.
Before he left, I was working on one CD, and I asked him, I had this idea that I want to ask him to play Swaramandal, a harp-like instrument. And I asked him, and he readily agreed. And I was very happy. So I went to his room, and my friend, he went upstairs to have this big shelves up, and he had to go inside, and it came all black and everything. And he got the instrument out, and Aindra was cleaning it for hours, and we brought it here first day. We've spent one day tuning it, and the second day recording it. And he was going on in that time again with his program of offering and not eating and not sleeping. And so I would record him on the computer, on the software, and he would sit here, actually where I'm sitting, and play it, headphones on, and he would like fall asleep, fall asleep, and then like go like that for like 5 seconds, then it would come out of it. And he says, "Oh, put it back to 32-1." He really knew where he was. He was like, "Okay," I put it back there. It was amazing. And then listen to the tracks, and he says, "Your singing is improving," which from my end is a great compliment.
There was like a group of guru coolies, and they would ask me to participate in the programs with them, and so we were doing Kirtan, and I just remember one night I was doing Kirtan with the guru coolies in the Samadhi, and for a while in Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi, and we had Kirtan, and it was fun, and it was like, all these young kids, and then afterwards I went up to Aindra Prabhu's room, and he was there, and Gopal was there, and Aindra Prabhu just kind of silent, and he's doing his deity worship, and not saying anything, and then at one point he just kind of he just turned around, and he looked at me, and he said, "I guess it's hard to avoid the association of beautiful young women when you're doing Kirtan with the Guru Coolies." And then he just kind of turned back to his deity worship, and Gopal and I just looked at each other, and Gopal was like, "Oh," it was such a rip, but it was soft but so hard at the same time. I felt so guilty, because actually it was a fact. It was a fact, and how pure is Kirtan when if there's so much mixed company, and it can diminish the pure spirit. I remember one time, maybe totally unrelated, he said something like, in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, they had groups of Sankirtan. They had women's groups and they had men's groups, but it wouldn't be that you'd have mixed groups of Kirtaniyas. I remember I repeated that to Jayadvaita Maharaj, and he said, "Yes, that's a fact." The ladies, they want to do Sankirtan. Great, that's so nice. Men want to do Sankirtan? Very good. But the point is, if they're mixed, there's every risk that people's consciousness may diminish. I was in Toronto at a Kirtan festival that was organized by Gopal and Madhava, and so I shared a room with Gopal and Madhava at that time, and they were on like a Skype call to Aindra Prabhu, and it was like, because of the time difference, it was like 4 in the morning in Toronto, and I had just taken my bath getting ready to go to Mangalartik, and I came into the room, and then, Aindra's on the line on the Skype call, and so, they told me it's Aindra on the phone, and then Gopal just said, "Hey, Aindra Prabhu, Akincana is here. He says Hari Bol." And then Aindra Prabhu said, "Tell him to get his butt back here as soon as possible." And so that was basically the last instruction I got from him. We found out the next evening that he'd had his accident and passed away.
And then, I left. I went up to him and I asked his mercy that I tell him, please give me your blessings. I can go on and do some preaching in the West. We're doing some Kirtan programs. So I need your blessings. And then that was it. And then he left. He left. My friend called me one morning. He was crying, He says, Aindra Prabhu left. The same friend who was here with me. And he was like, what do you mean, left? And I just didn't register. I couldn't understand it. It was so unexpected. And I didn't know what to do with this news. And it took me days before I could even, cry. And after that, I just came home. I was in Budapest, Hungary. I was there visiting and I saw this comet going down, very inauspicious. Just 24 hours after he left. And there's black cats going. What's going? It was like, oh boy, this is bad, very bad, And then the internet, we just exploded. Aindra left, and everybody's putting up pictures and kirtans, and I was amazed how many. We knew Aindra, the whole world loved Aindra, the grassroots, class at least, and people would come and Aindra Prabhu. That was many times, people come, Vivi, I play your kirtan, all day long, and we put it on the altar, we play it there all day long, your kirtan just keeps me going, nothing else keeps me going, and in ISKCON, only your kirtan keeps me going, and, but when that explosion on the internet and all these things, it was just amazing to see, and Aindra didn't accept any disciples, yet somebody said on the internet, he had no disciples. Yet he caused so much of a commotion.
It's him passing away when he did. It's been devastating. It's been life-changing. I've gone through, a lot of internal turmoil. Basically, I can say that when Aindra passed away, I immediately felt like something like my father died, and now it was no longer acceptable for me to be a child, and I have to grow up and be a man. That's basically the essence of how I felt and how I feel. I mean, the tragic loss of not having his association, that's like totally devastating. I mean, I have, every dream I have about Aindra is the same dream. It's always that I want to talk to him, and I'm not able to. Because that's like my anxiety. I just have so many questions. I want to spend more time with him. I want to, he's just so much shelter. And, at the same time, it's very, very clear to me, what makes Aindra Prabhu happy, what would make him happy about me, what, he wants to see me become, the types of things that, Aindra Prabhu appreciates. That's super clear to me. I spend enough time with him for that, at least, that, I'm not confused about what he wants from me and what he'd like to see from me. And they're actually very, very high things. They're very, things I'm going to have to work really hard for to even hope to come close to starting to be the person that, Aindra would want me to become.
And then now, it was very painful for everyone, and coming back here, it was very strange. People, when they come to Vrindavan, they came to see Aindra. That was the only reason they come here. They come here to see the Aindra's Kirtan and, go home with that in their mind, in their memory, he wasn't there sitting anymore. So, and we have to accept that. Some people just can't let him go. And it comes in dreams sometimes. And it was when I came to the temple room, and it felt so strange, and I was thinking, what's going to happen now, Devotees were there, same crew, but Aindra was not, so the whole place felt empty, really empty, And I saw the deities, and I saw Radha Shyam Sundar, and I looked at Radharani, and somehow, she was just telling me that everything's okay, don't worry. I'm here. So I felt reassured, okay, that's nice, it's not everything's lost, She is here. So I felt, safe again.
My friend told me there's no meaning to bhajan without separation, and we get the association of great souls just so that we can suffer in their absence. And that's what will give weight to our Krishna consciousness. My friends told me they spoke to Aindra Prabhu just like 2 weeks before he passed away. And one of my friends said to Aindra Prabhu, he said, "Prabhu, please bless me so that I leave this world before you do, because I just can't tolerate the idea of living in this world in your absence." He said that to Aindra. And Aindra said a few things. He said, "But if you die before I do, who will take care of the Kirtan department after I leave?" And he said, "Anyway, I've made so much spiritual advancement in the absence of my spiritual master." Aindra Prabhu said that. So hearing those comments kind of makes a lot of these simple, important points very, very clear. I do feel a duty to Aindra Prabhu's Kirtan department in the Vrindavan temple, and I'm a very unfortunate, unqualified person, but I hope to serve that department as far as I am able, in a way that would please him as far as I am humbly able. And I do hope that I'm able to make something out of, my worthless existence in his absence.
Remember Madhava Maharaj? He used to live in ashram also. He's a Balaram Bhakta, let's say that. And he would go and help dressing Krishna and Balaram. And Aindra has diarrhea, but he has 100 times more than the infection, So and you can't stop him. You just go. And Aindra would dress him, and he would dress Radha Shamsundar. He was always behind time because he made it so elaborate. And so Madhava Maharaj would come over from Krishna Balaram, and I wants to talk, and it's like hush him off. Ladies only. Go back. Go back to Balaram. It was funny like that, Every expression, everything he said, it was Krishna conscious. It was so fun to see. And it was so inspiring to see. I don't know, run out of memories or things to say.
Hare